Hey everyone, this is On and coming to you with this month's Connecting Codes video. Hey, um, it's an interesting world out there, isn't it? For those of you that don't know, my name is On. I go by On. My full name is Jessie On Nichols George. I am the author of The Code Journey, and it's a kind of spiritual almanac, and it covers, where we need to pay attention in our own daily life as well as what's going on in the world. And this channel in particular works with taking a look at what is happening in our world. What are the insights around world events that are coming in? And but that book is where a lot of my information comes from. I create a new edition of it every year. So that's kind of exciting, and seeing what's coming down the pike. And so you can always pick up a copy of that over on my website, compassioncodes.com. And the links are directly there if you go onto the goods tab, and then you'll see the code journey. And those links will get you directly to the purchase pages for either ebook or paperback on that. But each month, what I try to do here is to cover what's going down as far as what we can expect happening that might be connected to world events, based on what these energetic patterns are, what the code influences are for that time period. So we're looking at May in this video, what's going to be coming in for May of 2023. And we do have some things that we have to be paying attention to and being aware of, definitely. And what's really great with this work is it kind of gives us that heads up of when do we need to get out there and take action on things, and when do we need to step back, not be in the big crowds, not be, among the riots or things like that, when they can turn particularly dangerous. So that's always helpful if you are one of those people who are out there needing to make your voice heard or things like that. That book can kind of guide you. Is this a good time to do that? Is it not a good time to do that? And the importance of that is that if you do it in alignment with natural alignment, divine alignment, your voice can be heard more. You can have a bigger impact on things. If you're, you can stay safe. If you're going to go out and protest or do things like that, then you can stay safe in that process and know, okay, this isn't a good day for me to be out doing stuff. This day I can go out and I'll probably be okay in things. So it's a great guide. It's a great tool. It's also a personal journey tool of looking at, where do we need to keep our energy focused, that sort of thing. So let's get on into what's going down for May. And May, we're going to find a lot of storms coming up. And of course, anytime we start getting big storms, and it's really indicating in May, like some really, really major storms. So technically, tornado season, let's say, doesn't start until June most of the time, or is right around there. It can start a little bit earlier, but I would expect this year in May, we're going to see a lot of tornado activity. I think we're going to see a lot of things happening around the coastal regions. And I think that's connected because the water influences are always connected to our emotions. And so anytime there's a lot of emotional upheaval going on, a lot of trauma, a lot of drama, these sorts of things, it's going to particularly affect the water areas. So your coastal regions, your Gulf regions, your island regions, all of these types of things. It can also greatly have an impact like in volcanic areas. So again, our islands, whether you're talking Hawaii or you're talking Indonesia or, any of these areas, those could be maybe more susceptible to things happening. And then you also look at, well, what's the natural patterns going on? Okay, so it's naturally going to be tornado season in the Midwest of the United States as the temperatures are shifting and changing and moving towards warmer weather. The thing when the storm energy comes up is it's going to always help us know, hey, when do I need to stock up a little bit? And I would say definitely going into May, get some of those supplies on hand, have your water to see you through, have some dry foods on that are non-perishable foods that are gonna, be okay. If you need extra batteries for flashlights or that stuff, make sure your phones are remaining charged as much as possible, these sorts of things. And I would say if you're stocked up for a week or two, you're probably good. I mean, this isn't going into total disaster survival mode, but some of these storms could tear things down pretty good. And the thing is, if we are stocked up for ourselves, if and something doesn't hit in that area, then we've got a little something to share with somebody, right? We've got a little something to hand over to maybe those people that are. You look at a tornado region and one area can be hit, one town can be hit, and even 2 miles away, they might be totally fine. And so, having that there, it's maybe not always just about yourself. It's about being able to help somebody else in need as well. Now, I always get asked, is this heart related? Is this going to be, is this man-made? Is this natural made? In this aspect, the storms we're going to see, like I said, they're going to probably get pretty nasty. We're going to probably have a lot of them coming through. Is really a blend. In all honesty, we're going to see some of it that's weather manipulation tactics or instruments being used, and then there's going to be other parts of it that will just be natural. They're just, like I said, it's a natural time for tornadoes to come through. And then there are going to be some that are going to be stirred up by the emotions. So we really want to watch those areas around the world and in our countries where we have a high emotional charge. So for example, in France, you've got a high emotional charge going on over there right now. So that might be an area to watch as far as storms coming through. It wouldn't surprise me. You've got other areas of the world, whether you're talking Ukraine or Russia or China, where there's a lot of emotional charge going on. And there are definitely things that can happen that can create those emotional charges. We see a lot of things happening in California and New York here in the United States, Chicago, a lot of emotional charge going on there. And so those areas are all probably more likely to get hit even harder because of that going on. And a lot of times I like to say, if it is something that is man-created or, coming off of manipulation equipment, then those almost always are going to happen where we have political hotspots going on. So that will happen, in areas where there's either a lot of corruption that exists or where there's a big standing up to the corruption going on. So, pretty soon you start to go, well, doesn't that just pretty much cover everywhere? And in some ways it could definitely feel like that. I could definitely feel like that. So again, the thing with this is that the storms can come out of nowhere. They might not even be on the radar. Like you might look at the weather in the morning and there's no storms listed, and by noon there's storms coming in. And so we need to keep our eyes open. We need to pay attention. We need to be taking precautions on things, and we need to be ready to deal with it. And that's part of why I put these videos out early, so that when we have an influence like this, you have time to get to the store, do the stocking up that you need to do, and prepare yourself to deal with it. And that foresight is a beautiful and a powerful thing. We can't necessarily stop the storms from happening, but we can be ready to deal with them. And that's a huge key. Okay, so in the general influences from the 1st through the 21st, and I have to make my notes because my memory doesn't always, 100%. I can't rely on it all. So I have to have my notes here. Practical. We want to stay practical with things. Okay, we want to make sure we're not bouncing off into these extremes, getting swept up in people's drama and chaos that they're creating along the way. But this applies a lot to money at this time. So we do want to think practically. Obviously, you want to have what your needs are. It's not about depriving yourself, but it's about working within the budget that you have. And this is important, even when you're stocking up, is to consider this. We want to do our best to not use credit cards if we can during this time. Or increase our debt in any way. And we don't want to work on speculation. So you want to take a look. If you're headed to the store, you say, what do I have right now to work with on this moment, on this day? Not what's coming in, not what my paycheck is going to give me in 2 weeks or any of that kind of thing. You want to look at what do I have in hand right now that I can work with and work within that. And it might take a little creativity. It might take a few adjustments. It might, be there. But it's amazing when you get down to it that you can actually eat well and do well and, have your needs met, as long as you're not being excessive, as long as you're not doing these extra things. And this is part of this influence right now. When we start to spend money that we don't have, we create a lot of challenges energetically for ourselves. We create a lot of issues that come up. And at this time, if we do that and we put ourselves further in debt to go get something, or we're using the credit cards and we're just paying off the monthly bills or things like that, then we are setting ourselves up for greater hardships, harder times than just consciously saying, hey, let me just be a little conservative this week, a little, easy on the budget this week. So that's a huge thing for us to pay attention to. We've really got to pay attention to rebellion energy and triggers that come up. Now, this is gonna be coming through. We're gonna see it come through like with narratives, violence that breaks out. It's gonna they're gonna bring a lot of stuff up in the two-tier system. Rules that apply to one person don't apply to another person, type of thing. We're going to see a lot of things dramatized in rebellion. So an example of that would be, for example, recently we had the Nashville shooting, right? That was at the Christian school, and there were 3 children, 3 adults that were killed during that time. But what they did was they did this, instead of honoring the victims and what happened and caring about the families of those victims, it became this huge dramatized thing around the transgender movement. And so that was kind of a form of rebellion in a way. It was supporting it as justified. And this is what happens under this energy, is that the corruption creates a trigger. So kind of like, yeah, we're going to support the killer, but we're not going to support the families who were shot and killed. And we don't care about them, type of thing. So what does this do? This creates this huge rebellion, this huge anger in people around this unfairness, this unjustness that's going on. And we have to be careful of that, because when we let our triggers pull us into reaction and in rebellion, of course, we're going to set off natural influences, weather patterns and things, but they will then take that and use that against us. And this is the caution. This is why we've always got to be careful to find those lawful channels, the appropriate channels. It's not about being silent. You want to speak up, you want to say things, you want to be heard, but you got to work from the facts, and you need to find the appropriate ways to do it. The facts are always going to dispel the narratives. The facts are always going to supersede that if we can just get the facts out there and really help that to become visible. So we've got to be careful of those triggers, because there are going to be these narratives behind them. Everything that is creating a trigger in the population or the collective is going to be based around some narrative in there. And again, they'll take that and they'll dramatize it in the direction that they want it to be. And why do they do that? Because they want to justify violence against those people who are not supporting them. So, let's say you have Republicans that aren't supporting the extremist Democratic narrative. And so they will justify, again, this violence against the Christian children because those were families that didn't support them, because that was an area that didn't support them. So we've got to really watch this. We've got to stay in a space of taking action and not reacting, but we definitely want to watch where that rebellion energy comes up in us. Where are those triggers coming up? And that's important because it also shows what we need to work on, what we need to be paying attention to. And so, again, we can go back to that example of the Nashville shooting. It's not, necessarily the guns, but what we want to do is work on, we got to have some tougher crime laws, because see, the criminals are always going to find a way to get what they want, whether it's supplied, whether they get it in the black market or whether it's given to them by the government. They're going to find a way to have these weapons. And so, there's a whole layer of various things that are involved in that. And then, but the bigger thing is if there's no penalties for creating the crime, or if they can get off very, very easy, we see this a lot in New York City right now and Chicago going on, then they're just going to commit the crimes. But if there's a high penalty, if there's a strong level of accountability that's going on for the crimes, then you're not going to have so many crimes being committed. And these are the things that have to, be considered along the way. So it's, it would show us, for example, in a situation like that, we've really got to toughen up on the crime laws. We've really got to take a look and say, bring this equality. If you're going to show the manifesto of one person, you need to show the manifesto of the other person. These sorts of things, we've got to bring more of that. These are the guidelines, and you don't get to do it on this wide spectrum based on who you like or don't like. In the system, it's showing us that we need to bring some of these people into accountability, and that, we've got to make it that if this is the crime you commit, this is the price you pay. And not, not a difference of, if you commit this crime and you're of this political party, well, you can go off on bail or probation or something like that. But if you're of this political party, then, you're going to get 10 years in prison. And that, it's a huge difference in there. So this is showing us where we need to work on things as a society, where we need to stand up, the things that we need to be pushing for, the things that need to be resolved, taken care of, paid attention to. Now, we also have a big thing coming in here on the 1st through the 21st that is connected to where our health and our finances are going to be under attack. So that's why, it's actually really good if we're thinking in that practical mindset already, we're going to be able to deal with this a little bit easier. A lot of people during this time are going to feel like they're being hit with expenses that there's no way that they can cover. Our health is going to probably be much more vulnerable during this time. So that's our heads up. We've got to stay up on the nutrients. We've got to get the extra rest. We've got to be doing the things that our body needs. We've got to make our own well-being as a priority. And there are going to be people that don't like that, and that's okay. But you need to keep yourself well, and that is your responsibility. And I would say that this is kind of a temporary period. Yes, we're going in and out of this. We ebb and flow with this type of thing. But the reality of it is we want to start thinking about, can I go shopping in a time of day that it's not as busy in the store, that I'm not as exposed to as much? These sorts of things. Can I just go to the local farmer's market as opposed to going to the grocery store, where I'm not running across as much people, where my food quality is better? These sorts of things. So health and finances are going to come under attack in May. There could be agendas that are coming out connected to that, that we would see, but we may also see, again, more attempts of trying to restrict what people have to work with for healthcare. We could actually see more issues coming up in the healthcare system during this time. And they'll claim that they don't have money for it. They'll say, well, yeah, of course we have money to send to these nations, and we have money for war, but we don't have money for your healthcare. I think these are the types of things that we're going to have to pay attention to. And I'm one of those people, I believe food's one of the best healers, honestly. That's how I've always worked with things. That's how I've managed things. I have a lot of challenges that I deal with physically, but food has always worked the best. My body responds much better to that than it does chemicals and pills and drugs and things like that. So this is a time where sometimes just honoring what we need. Again, that extra rest, strong nutrients, get out in nature, get some fresh air, step away from the technology and things like that. And we just got to pay attention to that and just be strong in that. And you don't have to feel deprived under that. There's a lot of amazing, great flavors and everything like that with things that are quite healthy. The 22nd through the end of the month, we're still going to be seeing a lot of probably financial issues come up. And again, keep in mind, we're talking about 1 month. So it's not like this is going to last forever. We're going to go through these periods, and it's kind of like saying, hey, I've got to stretch my budget out until I get the next paycheck type of thing. It's really not a lot different than that in some ways, but we may have to think about it in a little bit bigger terms. And a lot of this is a call for us to just come into working within the budget that we have to work with. And that's not always as comfortable as we want it to be. That means we may have to let go of some extras or excesses or things like that. But that's not always a bad thing to do either. That doesn't mean we're deprived. That doesn't mean we're suffering. These sorts of things. It just means we got to make some shifts and some changes to adapt to what we can do. And the financial issues that we see happening are likely to bring on a lot of stress-related challenges. So when we talk about stress, that makes us think, okay, it's not just the standard A, C, D3 type of vitamins. It is, you want to look at your B vitamins, you want to look at some physical exercise. Of course, this can trigger other things in people. If people don't handle stress well, then those are going to be the people that are going to be more easily triggered. They're going to go out and do things. And so definitely watching that, keeping that under check. And again, our rest has a huge impact on that. But if we're working within our budget, if we're working in these practical and responsible ways, those financial challenges won't be as big. But it is an indicator, and it is something that people are going to have to pay attention to, because I think this is where some of the things are starting to come to culmination, and people are realizing, hey, we got into these things and we've got these high payments on the house, or we've got this, or we've got that. And they're going to have to realize, wow, it's a matter of me paying my bills or not paying my bills in situations. So some of these people who have been charging these really outrageous rents along the way and things like that, just because they could get them, they're probably going to have to make some shifts. And it's going to be more like, can we pay our bills and focus on getting a good tenant in, as opposed to this other piece, as opposed to having the place sit empty or things like that. We also have the tyrants. The tyrants are going to become more tyrannical. And we're already seeing this, right? We're seeing some of the older people pulled out, some younger people put into positions. We saw this in Chicago, but the people they're placing in those positions are actually more tyrannical than the extremists that were already in there. So, we saw this in New York. This happened, when they did the shift over in New York. And then we've seen this now in Chicago. And I think we're going to try to see it in more places. And what's happening is they're losing power. So when they lose power, they become more tyrannical, right? Because they're trying to regain that power, that control back. The extremism is likely to grow during this time. But the positive news is that this is likely to backfire on them. It's probably going to backfire in a really big way, because people are sitting at that stress level, right? They're already saying, hey, I'm being responsible. I'm being practical. I've cut my corners. And when the restrictions become heavier, when these attempts to become more controlling come down the line, you're going to see people hit that breaking point, because they're already at their stress levels. And that's going to create the backfires on it. We saw this with, well, you could even take the Bud Light thing that just went down recently, and people are like, I'm done with this. And, the backlash has been harsh. And so that's a big thing in there. A lot of attempts for greater control over people. And this is actually going to drive more and more people into thinking about how to become more self-sufficient. And we always have these things because people automatically think, well, I can get off grid with solar, I can get off grid with this, I can do this, I can do that. But we have to be careful. And the challenge is no matter what we're using for power at this point in time, there's going to be impacts. There's going to be impacts on our physical well-being. There's going to be impacts on the environment. And, you know, some of these things we've been programmed are friendly, like solar and wind and things like that. They have a lot of other complications to them, and they're not cheap, and they're expensive. And, you know, there's a lot of toxic waste that goes with the solar panels and all of these things too. So there's a lot more to be considered. I mean, unless you're willing to really be off grid, no electricity, those sorts of things. I dream about it sometimes. More than a few times. But, you know, we're going to see more and more people looking to increase that self-sufficiency, more about how do I get out of these systems? How do I step away from these control areas? And that will probably actually drive more people out of the extremist states. So we'll probably see more people than we already have leaving California, leaving Chicago area, leaving New York area, and moving towards other areas where they don't have those restrictions going on. So you know, again, these are things that we want to pay attention to, because it helps us to understand where some of the trends are, where people's mindsets are, where they're working in fear, where they're working in confidence, where they've hit their breaking points, all of these things. And so I think that sometimes we have to find those balances. I mean, as much as I would love to just, you know, if I didn't have a business, if I didn't need to do videos, if I didn't need to interact with people, I could very easily live off grid, no electricity and these things. And I would be happy with that, actually. Doing that, if I could have my freedom, I would take that. But, you know, I need to be able to interact with people for my business. I need to be able to put videos out. I need to do the book and publish and all of these things. So always finding our balance in there, but certainly if we can step out of some of that control and power, it sends a very strong message. If we're not willing to support it, then we want to do that. But again, be careful, because again, a lot of people, the first thing they do, and I know here in Maine, they put up a ton of solar panels. It's going to be an issue, because it's going to be a lot of health issues going on, and it affects the plant life, and it affects the soil, and it affects a lot of things that we rely on for our well-being and our self-sufficiency. So we're going to have to work it out. I think we got a lot of changes coming down the line. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And I think some of those balancing points are going to show up. So we want to be careful too, because another big tactic that's going to come out is the corruption's going to be looking in that last part of the month to use our basic needs and weaponize those against us. So when I look at that, that makes me think, okay, they're going to probably work with something within the health system and use that to weaponize against us, hold our health care out. We could see this, I don't think we're going to see it so much this month, but an example would be like, okay, if you don't get a shot or a jab, then you're going to not have health care. If you don't do certain things, you're not going to be able to have access to certain food. So they're going to start bringing in this fear around our basic needs. There's already enough out there. I mean, when you look at how much of the food supply has been contaminated already, you know, it's already there. But we could see more things happening around the food plants, or, you know, animal processing plants, or you know, we could see more things happening that would affect crops if they're cloud seeding, if they're doing, you know, spraying stuff in the air, these sorts of things. That would all affect basic needs, and there could be more coming out in relation to that. I think that's a big thing. I think we might find out more about how the mRNA technology that's now being used in the animal vaccinations and stuff like that, that they will, we'll probably see more happening with the animals. We might start seeing some of the results of that, since they started that kind of around the end of 2022 coming into 2023. So we might start seeing some of that come up in things. So again, that's going to be an interesting thing, but I think that's one of the things that's really going to kind of be hard for people to deal with, in all honesty. A greater realization is going to come out of government control over our private lives. So I think there's a lot of people out there, honestly, I mean, it's hard to believe for some people, but there's a lot of people out there that still don't really understand how much government has control over their lives. How they're monitoring their messages in social media, how they're doing a whole variety of things, how they influence things, how their network is. So I think that that's going to be a huge thing, and that may connect in to weaponizing the basics, our basic needs of food, shelter, heating, air conditioning, things like that. And so that could be, power things going down, or thing, utilities, blackouts, brownouts, things like that going on. That can all be part of it, and that could increase some of the realization. But I think we're going to see a lot more exposure coming out that shows us that level of control and how it's been increased. And that connects right in with partnerships and corrupt networks getting exposed. So we're going to see a lot of this government, private industry connection stuff getting exposed. And they're seeing how these, like the Gates Foundation is connected to the WEF or the WHO or these sorts of things, and their role in things, and how that then influences the government. So I think these networks are going to have an exposure coming out in May, which is going to be interesting to see just how much or what comes out. It's particularly seems to be connected to joint ventures, from what I'm seeing in this. And that will then be used to manipulate people and basically hold them hostage to the corruption. And one of the channels that we see that come out through is the media. So like your mainstream media sources, and they will use your mainstream media sources to manipulate your perception, your concept of things, your understanding of things, what information you get, so that you're only basically getting the information they want you to have versus the actual truth in things. And so you're just getting the narrative, and that holds you hostage to the corruption when they do that. And so again, we're going to have to speak out on these things, but I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of exposure going on. So this, how do all of these groups interact? How are they all related? Now, of course, there's people that have been staying up on this, and they're already familiar with these big networks of things, but to bring it more into the public eye, I think is going to be a huge thing. And I think that's also going to, bring a lot of people into a new understanding of what we've been living under and what we've been going under. This is a great time to really help those people who are struggling to help themselves, but they're trying. And so here again, like I said, if you've got extra supplies that you've built up and stuff like that, certainly you want to take care of yourself, and you want to have enough for yourself. But if something comes up, and you got to think there's a lot of people out there that it doesn't take much. It doesn't take being wiped out by a storm to put them in extreme detrimental conditions. If you're working minimum wage jobs, if you are not making a lot of money. I mean, I don't make any huge amounts of money for the work that I do. I rely a lot on donations or contributions or things like that. And small things can just be very detrimental. And so if we're willing to give a little bit to each other, this does a couple of things. It starts to move us into a different mindset of taking care of each other, which is going to be extremely important, especially if bigger things come down the line, which is expected and predicted by a lot of people. That we need to get back in that mindset. But of course, the difference is always knowing who is helping themselves, who's out there trying, but they're just struggling for whatever reason. Maybe they have tough codes in this life. Maybe they just naturally hit challenges. Maybe, they just hit a period that's a hard time for them. And those who are freeloaders, who appear to be victims, but are not really victims. And I think that's another area we're going to see come up in the news, or see maybe bills or whatever initiated around, is this aspect of coming down or tightening up on those people who are getting a lot of benefits that don't need them. Now, I'm one of those people. I've looked at things from time to time, and I'm having to relook at them again in my life and say, am I eligible for this? And then part of me goes, do I even want to be in the system and apply for it if I was? And having to weigh those things out. But there's, we've got a lot of people on the system that they just don't want to do anything. It's not a matter of need. And we do need to take care of the people in need. We do need to take care of the people who truly are struggling. But at the same time, we don't need to be taking care of the people that just want a free ride and don't need to do anything. So we're going to have to find that balance. I think we're going to see more coming out on that. Maybe one of the things that's connected to that will be the whole student loan thing. We might see something resurface on that. That would be a possibility, I would think, because that's kind of like saying, hey, you go do whatever you want and we'll just have everybody else pay for it. And, somebody like me, I don't have that kind of money. I can't afford it. I can't afford it for myself, let alone to pay for it for somebody else. And so I think we're going to see more coming out in those areas on that. Materialism is really, really focused on breaking the spirit. So the corruption is going to have a big emphasis on how do we break the spirit of the people? How do we break them down so that we can get this control over them? Well, I can think of a couple of different ways. I think there may be some payoffs that get made to try to attack Trump or get him to a point where his supporters no longer believe it. I mean, right there, you're talking like 80 million people in the US, maybe more, that, something happened to Trump, if they twisted it and spun it the right way or whatever, and, that would probably remove a lot of hope from people in the world. I personally don't think they would get away with anything like that. Just with all that's going down. And if anything, it would probably bring in more support in his direction if they do that. But I think that's one possible area, because what they want to do is break the spirit. They want to break the hope in there. I think we're going to see more attacks coming up on God and on churches, and more probably satanic aspects that are coming out on things. And again, this is all about breaking the spirit. Like, look, God's not going to come help you. Look, I think it's going to be more and more in that aspect. Certainly, there's always a possibility that this can connect to animals, right? In things, it's just like people. You create a disease, and that brings a lot of profit to pharmaceutical industries and medical industries and things like this. So we want to be very careful of that. The same thing happens with animals. If you've shifted over to mRNA technology and what they're getting, then that's going to create issues in animals, and that's going to break the spirit of people, but that's also going to be around materialism. It's being done for materialism, not for health or safety purposes or things like that, or because it's necessary or needed. And these are the things that we got to really keep our eyes over. Now, the 1st through the 20th, we're getting into our action areas here. We're going to see a lot of action around exposure of lies, deception, and manipulation coming up. And this is really calling us to take action in our own private lives. And the more we take action in our own private lives, the more we create a movement, right? It's not just about everybody, for example, gathering outside of Budweiser's facilities. It's bar owners, it's individuals, it's all of these people saying, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to buy that product or this or that. And what we want to do is be able to support each other. And when I say that, it's about supporting each other, supporting those businesses, supporting those individuals who are standing up for freedom, who are supporting truth and integrity in the world, who are doing these things to truly make a difference in our world. And this is part of creating what is being referred to as a parallel economy in there. And the reality of it is we have a choice. We always, I say this a lot, we have a choice where you're going to put your money. Are you going to buy the product from the store that is corrupt, that is full of poisons, that is full of political agendas, that is, all of these things that are supporting the narratives and the corruption? Or are you going to go buy something from your local farmer or your local small business or things like this? And these are the things we have to look at. What are we going to support? Because we have to build this up so that these businesses can grow in things and that we can have businesses that are in integrity. And that's really what it's about. It doesn't matter what political affiliation there are. It's about whether they're working in integrity. And more, I'm hearing people say, and I agree with it, I just want to get back to, if you teach a class, teach your class. If you do provide a product, provide that product and do it well and do it with integrity. And that's what I want to support. Make a quality product with integrity. That's what I'm going to support. And, these are the things. And yes, we have to look a little bit beyond that in certain cases, but we've got to come back to these fundamentals, these fundamental pieces and things. And so that's a very important one. So we've got to definitely look at that. A lot of, this goes with the parallel economy. Find your own successes, build your own connections and your own partnerships. So know who else is working in this range of truth and integrity. Know who else wants to uphold freedom. Know who else wants to uphold rights and choices and things like that. And connect with those people and start to think about, if I can't do some of the things I'm doing today, if I can't work in the places I'm working, these sorts of things, what could I do on my own? Do I have skill sets? Do I have trade knowledge? Do I have other things besides working in retail, big business, corporations, things like that? Because they're all under attack, realistically. So we've got to start thinking about, well, what can I do or provide as a skill? And what can I do or provide? Can I start developing my knowledge in a trade? Things like this. Think those practical skills, and that's going to be very important to help you be able to maintain success and to keep moving forward when things are crashing down. A lot of power battles and power plays are going to be really, really strong. And the biggest battle is between those who want control over you and those who are fighting for your freedom. So that's the huge, big battle that's at play. And again, we have to really look at it. And this is that battle for controlling every area of life and fighting for your freedom. And we're really down to some of these fundamentals. We need to, as we get to the end of the month, from the 21st on, we need to let tyrants fall out of power. And they will, because as they take these actions, these extreme actions, they're going to get exposed by people within their inner circles. And we need to step out of the way and let them fall out of power and let them fall down, so to say, and take back command of our own life. That's a big part of this. Freedom is under huge, huge attack during the end of the month. It's a huge attack. So there's something that's going to come up that they're really going to come down and start taking away rights. They're really going to start taking away abilities. I've always been so grateful that within the last couple, I think it was last year, that we finally here in Maine got on our Constitution the right to be able to grow our own food for self-sufficiency. And that is huge because they were in the process of trying to take that away from us and saying you can't grow for personal consumption. And so this is a weird thing. I mean, where do you draw that line? How do you monitor it? I don't know, but having it actually in the Constitution as a state constitutional right is a huge thing. And I certainly hope more states will do that. I think that's very, very important. And that's a big thing in here. We've got to stand up for that self-reliancy. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't go buy other things from people or stuff like that, but you need to be able to be reliant. You need to be able to make your own choices if you want to grow your own food, if you want to do certain things. That has to be your choice and not something that's taken from you that says, oh no, you can't grow your own food. You have to go to the market and you have to go to this specific market and you have to buy this specific brand because that's the money we want to support. So, you know, these things they got a lot of layers and they're important for us to stay on top of. We also, at the very end of the month, we're going to see a lot of things where history is repeating itself. And this comes up more than once. And in some way, we're going to be given a sort of second chance at something and to do it, but we have to get it right. We have to get it right when that second chance comes up, whatever it is. Now, I was connecting with some things, and it comes down anytime history is repeating itself, we want to look and understand what the patterns are in what we're experiencing, and then how do we create a favorable future? You know, we don't want to make the mistakes of the past. We don't want to have certain things repeating themselves. But a big thing that I connected here had to do with, of course, it connects with how power is being used in the world, and that kind of backtracks a little bit to letting the tyrants fall out of power. If we're using our power wisely, we can have some really great successes. If we are not using our power wisely, we're going to have some really hard falls. And so the corruption is setting up their own falls. We got to let them fall. But as far as patterns in history repeating itself, I've connected back to where it seems like a lot of, there's a lot of repeating of things that connect with the 60s that were going on, whether we're talking about the assassinations. We had John Kennedy assassinated in the 60s. We had Robert Kennedy assassinated in the 60s. We had Martin Luther King assassinated 2 months before Robert Kennedy was assassinated. We had a lot of attacks on our freedoms at that time. We had stuff connected to the Vietnam War going on at that time. So we have a lot of stuff, and this connects in with our more soul energy, with our you know, our essence beyond the human self. So this impacts not just our physical action-based human stuff, but it also affects our soul stuff that's going on, which tells me that the battles that we're in are much bigger. They're much bigger than just stuff. And it is over us. It is over us. It's over humanity. It's over the rights and the freedoms and things like that. So, you know, also in the 60s, we had a lot of racism motivated riots and violence going on. We're seeing that repeating itself now. So I think here at the end of the month, you know, this last part of the month in particular, we'll see bits of it throughout the month, but I think the biggest time we're going to see it is like in that last third part of the month, and we're going to see probably maybe some more riots breaking out, more violence coming out, more things based around civil rights and cultural things, counterculture stuff going on. Big things probably coming out around voting rights. That was also big back in the 60s. So I think we're really have a lot of connections to the 60s coming up during that time that we want to pay attention to. I think also there could be some, because there are connections around deaths and accidents in May as well, you know, deaths that appear to be accidents that aren't accidents, things like that. We could also possibly see some exposure or more things coming out about JFK's RFK, Martin Luther King, JFK Jr. We could see more of those kind of connections coming out, more information coming out about it. I talked about that coming out some this month, and we have seen some of that come out. There are people that are doing more and more talking about it. And then, of course, RFK Jr. announced his run for presidential, to be a presidential candidate. So, I mean, these connections are all there. They're all there in there. From the 1st through the 19th, the mindset that people are going to be in or that we want to keep in is to try to keep as much of an open and objective mindset as possible. And that's not easy when things are emotionally charged and everybody's getting reactive. But we want to do our best to see things as they are and not how we want them to be. It doesn't matter where you stand on things. We want to look at them for what they are and not just, hey, this is what I want to see in it. And when we do that, we're going to get a clear picture on things. We're going to have a better idea of what we need to speak up about, what we need to say, what we need to state, what we need to, push our reps for in things. The tricky thing is our mind is very unclear, and our mind can jump thoughts around. It can think that it has heard something when it hasn't, or vice versa. It just we have to trust the intuitive a little bit more on things than the logical mind. And so this is a blend that we're going to have to find. And again, that's why you really want to try to take an objective look at things as opposed to just looking at something. If we're just looking at something, we're going to probably read things into it more. And the mind is just not clear. So it's not picking up the logical processes. It misses things. We might have to go back and relook at things more than once to grasp it all in there. We're going to see, again, the attacks on health and finances magnified in that first little over half of the month in there. And we're going to have to be careful on that. It's going to be tight for a lot of people. It's going to be tough for a lot of people that are maybe not filling up to par. And again, we have to respect our limitations. We have to take care of ourselves, not overdo it, not overexert it. All of these basics that we're being brought back to. There's a big focus during that time on abundance. And again, that spirit being attacked through the deprivation mindset. And that's one of the things that we don't think about, because we start to think, oh, I've got to give up this and I've got to give up that. And I'm suffering because I can't go out to eat three nights this week, or I can't go party with my friends this week, or things like that. And we are not. Most of, yes, there are people out there that are in true deprivation. Most people are not. I mean, I work on a ridiculously minimal budget most of the time, and will, like many people, be in that space very soon. This comfy space is not going to be mine in a month and a half, and I'm going to be on the road, and I'm going to be camping, and I'm going to be not with an actual roof over my head. And it can be very easy to go into that deprivation mindset and say, poor me, I don't have this, I don't have that. But you know what? Most of the time we are not. And we got to realize that when we turn to our addictions, when we turn to the things that aren't healthy for us, when we take the steps that break down our health instead of add to it, when we go into these deprivation mindsets just because we've got to tighten up a little bit, we are creating portals and openings for all of this negativity to come in and bombard us. It breaks down our spirit. And that is one thing we just can't afford to give up on, just like we can't afford to not take care of ourselves. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and spend $1,000 in, health products to take care of yourself. Like I said, I do most of my healthcare with food. I have one supplement I think I take, and it's not even truly a supplement in that sense. But I mean, these are the things that put the spirit under attack. So we want to keep our mind on being abundant regardless of what we have. And the reality of it is, I've been there. I've been homeless. I've been on the streets. I get it. but it didn't stop me from having an abundance mindset. And that is very important. You know, even in those hardest spaces, we oftentimes have something to give. It might be our time as opposed to money. It might be lending a helping hand in something as opposed to, you know, contributing food or whatever else. But we all have our ways, and we have to feel that within us, and we want to make sure we take the time to keep that connection. And that also comes when we're take the time to process our stuff, right? And not get lost in all these worries and anxieties, which is very easy to do in world affairs and going down. Now, from the 20th through the end of the month, there's going to be a lot of things coming up around freedom and our ability to survive. We have to make sure, you know, our choices are very, very critical. And this is where, you know, they're coming down hard on us. We've got to stand strong, and we've got to make sure that we are choosing things that support freedom and that allow for divine will, not fake divine will. There's a difference there. And, you know, again, our mind is not the clearest, but if we keep our focus on what provides us with freedom, what allows us to keep our choices going, what, you know, what is actually going to create health or favorable paths forward. And these are the things that are there. We have to look at, you know, we don't have to be in a total survivalist mindset, but we have to look at what is going to allow us to get by. And that means protecting our water sources. That means, you know, protecting our land. That means, you know, taking care of these things, because in hard times, that's what's going to take care of you. And you've got some real basics in there when we look at food and elements and shelter and things like that. So definitely something to keep in mind there. Again, things wrap back around throughout the month. You know, what nourishes our soul during the month is being responsible, honoring our commitments, being practical about things. Don't procrastinate on them. Put off paying something. You may find you don't have that money there when you need it to pay for it. So take care of things right away. We need to stay focused, and part of responsibility is holding people accountable and make our representatives in our states and our countries accountable. We need to hold them accountable for their choices. We need to stand up there and be there saying, we need you to support us on this. This is what we want. This is what we want to see happen. And we've got to be there, you know, not just brushing things over anymore, going, oh, well, it's going to be whatever it's going to be. And I get to a certain extent that, yes, there is this infiltration and there's these mass networks, but our voice is always louder. And we see that with company over and over and over again, that our voice is always louder in things. And as some of these things collapse, you know, it shows the power is in the people. It's in the people coming together. It's in the people working with each other. It's in people standing up in groups for what is right, for what truth, for justice, these sorts of things. We cannot afford to increase our debt at this time, and we cannot afford to use resources that we don't have. And this is really going to be destructive to the financial system. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that the corruption is probably going to go on a big spending spree, right? I mean, that's only natural. When that's what we can't afford to do, that's probably what they're going to do and things. So, you know, we're really going to have to be careful. These countries, like even the United States, have the debt stuff going up, and they've said, look, we've hit this limit. We can't go there. So, you know, I think there could be some even possibly big things that come down in the financial systems in May, or they may be initiated in May. We may not see them till June or July, but they may be initiated. We already know that some things have been initiated in April on our financial system, but you know, we're going to have to be careful of this, because if they keep spending so freely, if they keep sending billions out, if the US keeps sending billions of dollars out to all these countries, and, you know, peace treaties and WHO and WF and all of this stuff, I mean, it's going to have some disastrous results. And that is when we're going to start finding ourselves in survival modes. Again, that death, that accident energy is in there. I think as far as death and accident energy coming up, I think there's going to be a lot connected to health issues. I won't necessarily say it's specifically connected to jabs, but there's a lot of different health issues. We're maybe going to see health issues that are suddenly starting to emerge. Again, those patterns of, okay, people that took this path or this route all of a sudden are having, diabetic issues. All of a sudden are having blood sugar issues. I've heard that a lot in people. So we could see these things coming up. I think there's going to be more there. All the death and accidents is going to be based around greed and lies. So if you have people that don't want to be exposed, you could see some deaths happening or so-called suicides or accidents happening over people who conveniently decided not to be connected to those corrupt people anymore. And I think we'll see lies around the deaths become exposed. So if something happens to somebody, let's say, somebody's knocked off and then, their death is going to open up and show some additional lies that have been existing and in place, and it's going to validate some things. There could be some jab cover-up stuff going on in this time, claiming that things are not connected to that when they are. So I think it's going to get interesting around that. Of course, there's always going to be legitimate deaths. There's questions of, we do have a couple of people out there that are not doing well, Dianne Feinstein and a couple of other people that are in the political arena. And, there's always question of, will that be a convenient time for them to exit the world, or, Fords and, some of these people, the Bushes or things. I mean, you've got all of these these connections in there, and I think it's going to be interesting. So we definitely have some interesting things. I hope this gives you a heads up on what is going down in our world for May. It's still not going to be an easy lighten up time. We just don't live in those times, we just don't live in the easy lightened up times right now. And we just got to be aware. But if we have this foresight, we can deal with things. You can come back and go, I remember An was talking about that. An was warning us that we got to take care of our health, and we can't, we got to be responsible with our finances. And she warned us about the weather coming in and being more intense and not to take chances with that. And she warned us, and talked about what these deaths could be connected to, and talked about how, these clamping down on our freedoms might be connected to the 60s and things like that. And these things are interesting and they're fun, and it doesn't guarantee that one specific thing is going to happen or not happen, or that it's going to be connected this way, but it gives us the heads up of the currents that we are dealing with. And if we understand those currents, then we understand what's coming down the line. We understand what we need to do for ourselves. We understand that, okay, this is the time to speak up. This is the time to demand accountability on people. This is the time to bring this forward. And yet at the same time, we also have to be careful, right? Because, we see a lot of these big corporations. I had that somewhere in here. More stuff coming out around the big companies, the big corporations crashing. And that's actually in the first part of May that comes down. So when you look at that, of course, that's going to affect people. Of course, that's going to make resources sparse, right? You've got Walmart, you've got Whole Foods, you've got, other companies that are shutting down in areas like Seattle, in California, in, again, Chicago, these different areas, these big cities where there's so much crime going on. They can't keep their stores going. Everything's looted out of the stores. They're losing so much money. And yes, that's going to end up creating some job losses for people along the way. And this is that heads up, because if we know this is coming down the line, again, we can restructure and say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't just be looking at these areas that are focused on materialism, which retail is. Retail is a very materialistic, even if it's providing things that are our needs. It's very materialistic based. And we need to come back and say, okay, so maybe I need to focus on developing trades. I need to develop construction skills. I need to develop plumbing skills. I need to develop whatever skills it is. And I need to start thinking outside of this because, you know, there was a time all these big corporations were incredibly reliable. You went into them because of the benefits, because they were stable, because you could work there for 40 years and retire and these things. And that's not the case anymore. They're not stable anymore. And the more these corporations that choose to nourish the corrupt narratives and the corrupt agendas, the more of them that are going to crash along the way. So there you have it. It's information. We never know with the codes, again, exactly how something is going to manifest. It's not about predicting so-and-so is going to do this on this specific date. That's not what they're there for. They're there to give us foresight. They're there to give us warning. They're there to help us understand what is behind what is happening. And as we do that, as we work with that, we can hold our divine self. We can hold into that divine connection. We can hold into upholding what is right in the world. And we can invite divine presence into situations on our earth. We can stand up for what is truthful and what is right in the world, and integrity and values. And these are all things that become incredibly great and important for us to do. So keep that in mind. I know this will help you get through May. Give the channel a like. I put these out every month. I love putting them out. I love giving people this heads up. And, you know, subscribe to the channel. Give the video a like. Pop over to the website, compassioncodes.com. Check out the work. Again, every year a new edition comes out. This is the 2023 edition. And there on the website, you'll see the goods tab and you'll see the code journey under the goods tab. And that will get you right into where you can purchase a book if you'd like to purchase a book in there. And I'm getting ready to go on tour again. This is going to be a big one. I am creating a grid of echoing heart energy. So I will be doing 52 presentations over 5 months across the US, or a little less than 5 months. Be starting in the Vermont area, and also my website. I think it's under the media tab, event happenings is where I will be listing that. And I'm still putting a lot of the locations up because I've been busy writing all winter. And you'll see that coming up, and that will give you an idea of where I'm going to be. Again, a lot of that will be getting put up in May. And tour starts in June. I'm going to be planning to be in Denver at a show in June. I'll be starting the tour, starting and ending the tour in Vermont. But I'll be going across a lot of other states. I'll be in Oklahoma, and I've got requests to do something around St. Louis area, and I'll be over in Texas, just outside of Dallas at one point. I'll be in Omaha, Nebraska at another point. So I've got a lot of places around the US I'll be, and maybe you'll make it to a live event as well. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you next month.